urgently. We have a fraudster refusing to leave.
Sir, I need you to accompany me.
I highly recommend checking section 14.3 of the employee guidelines.
That is a classic scammer tactic.
This is the story of how a powerful CEO proved that assumptions are the most expensive luxury item, ultimately costing 2 managers their entire careers and $8 million in legal exposure, all within 7 agonizing minutes. The place was the Pinnacle Reserve, Chicago's temple of corporate excess. It was late, just before midnight, and the air was chilled by the expensive imported stone that lined the lobby. Randall Hayes, the night supervisor, was a man who measured worth by thread count and polish. He saw a visitor who did not fit the template. Julian Vance was dressed in standard, serviceable clothes, a dark, plain jacket, worn denim, and scuffed leather boots. He looked tired, perhaps even disheveled. Randall approached the counter, his posture radiating aggressive disdain. He had already decided this man was an inconvenience, a misunderstanding, or worse, a fraud. Randall reached across the highly polished granite and snatched the titanium-finished corporate card from Julian's hand. The gesture was swift and designed to shock. Randall inspected the card, dismissing it instantly as a cheap imitation. His lip curled in a scoff that was loud enough to carry through the quiet lobby. He declared the card an insult to the establishment. Randall then performed the final act of dismissal. He dropped the card onto the imported terrazzo floor, the sound sharp and final. He then casually twisted his polished Italian shoe over the titanium plastic, grinding the $5,000 corporate access limit beneath his heel. He ensured the destruction was thorough. Julian Vance, exhibiting unnerving calm, simply pulled out a phone and presented a confirmation number for the top-floor executive suite. The young desk clerk, Bethany, watched the scene unfolding with nervous, fascinated eyes. She offered a hesitant, forced giggle, suggesting that anyone could fabricate a digital confirmation. Before we see how this dramatic error reshaped the entire corporate structure of this luxury chain, tell me, where in the world are you watching this story unfold? Drop your city and country in the comments. The lobby felt suddenly smaller, thicker with tension. Julian Vance stood perfectly still, absorbing the public humiliation without any visible reaction. His stillness was unsettling, a silent challenge that Randall Hayes failed entirely to recognize. Randall believed silence indicated defeat. He thought the man was cowed. The night supervisor leaned back against the counter, already composing the incident report in his head, mentally ticking the box marked "Resolved." Randall considered himself an expert in maintaining the elite facade of the Pinnacle Reserve. He prided himself on detecting misplaced clientele instantly. Julian's worn attire, the simplicity of his presentation, and the quiet dignity he maintained only confirmed Randall's immediate assessment. This was a nobody attempting a high-stakes, fraudulent booking. The pulverized corporate card remained abandoned on the expensive floor, a sparkling gray crescent of plastic dust reflecting the overhead lights. Bethany, the clerk, watched Julian with increasing trepidation. She saw something in his eyes that didn't match the image of a defeated petty criminal. His gaze was not angry or desperate. It was analytical and focused, like a predator assessing the enclosure before striking. She tried to soften the situation by offering a generic apology for the confusion, but Randall cut her off with a sharp glare. He wanted the man gone now, before any genuine high-value guests arrived for their late check-in. The incident was polluting the pristine atmosphere of the lobby. Julian ignored Randall and slowly checked the digital display on his sleek phone. The time registered 11:53 p.m. This was a critical piece of information, a personal deadline that loomed larger than Randall's immediate aggression. Randall, misinterpreting the phone check as a desperate last resort, stepped forward, ready to physically usher the man toward the exit. He reached for the phone, intending to terminate the call or the display, further asserting his authority. Julian simply moved the device just out of Randall's reach. He maintained absolute nonviolence, relying only on precise, minimal movements. This quiet resistance only fueled Randall's growing indignation. He was used to instant, subservient obedience from those he categorized as lesser. The supervisor failed to grasp the significance of the looming 7-minute deadline. He only saw a man defying the strict protocols of his opulent establishment. The sense of creeping professional doom began, subtle as a hairline crack in the foundation. The stakes were astronomical and entirely invisible to the hotel staff. Julian Vance had exactly 7 minutes remaining before he was due to join a crucial video conference. This was no ordinary meeting. It involved a $350 million negotiation with a major Asian manufacturing partner, a deal that Cornerstone Holdings had been meticulously building for 9 months. Missing this meeting, or appearing distracted or unprofessional, could derail the entire financial quarter and severely damage international relations. Julian needed the privacy, the robust connectivity, and the absolute silence of the top-floor suite. He needed it immediately. Randall, oblivious to the high-level finance vibrating in Julian's hand, leaned in closer, his voice dripping with theatrical condescension. He gestured grandly around the expansive lobby. Randall launched into a proud, arrogant recitation of the hotel's prestige. He declared the Pinnacle Reserve a sanctuary for diplomats and genuine industry giants. He implied that Julian's presence was an affront to their curated clientele. Randall looked Julian up and down, making a deliberate, exaggerated sweep of judgment. He dismissed Julian's appearance, suggesting the man looked like he had just finished a shift clearing the establishment's dirty tables. This commentary was loud and intentionally designed to draw attention. Randall's actions were not only witnessed by the staff, but by a crucial third party. Tucked away discreetly in the luxurious seating area near a water feature sat Chloe. Chloe was a college student, highly engaged in digital media, waiting for her late-arriving parents. She had been observing the escalating profiling for several minutes. Recognizing raw, public injustice when she saw it, Chloe silently initiated an online broadcast. She minimized the phone screen slightly, holding it casually in her lap, capturing the scene with professional steadiness. Her whispers to the phone were quick, urgent, and outraged. She confirmed to her rapidly growing viewer count that she was watching blatant discrimination unfold live at one of downtown Chicago's most exclusive hotels. She added the relevant trending hashtags and watched her viewership spike sharply. The humiliation Julian was enduring was now broadcast globally, documented for posterity, rapidly transforming from a private dispute into a viral corporate liability. The situation reached the next phase of managerial involvement. The subtle, nervous tension finally drew the attention of Lena Miller, the assistant manager on duty. Lena arrived swiftly from her back office, recognizing the distinct sound of Randall's aggressive tone. Randall immediately presented the situation to her, framing Julian Vance as a clear fraudster, a problem already on the cusp of resolution. Lena, however, noticed the slight discomfort radiating from Bethany and the intensity of the quiet man at the counter. She did not challenge Randall's narrative, but instantly adopted his posture of suspicion and superiority. She bypassed the damaged corporate card entirely and immediately escalated the bureaucratic demands. Lena requested official government identification, treating Julian's digital reservation confirmation with visible suspicion, flipping the phone screen away from herself as if fearing contagion. She handled the paperwork he presented like a suspected forgery, holding it gingerly by the corner. Randall took advantage of Lena's presence to finalize his removal strategy. He reached for the desk phone and dialed the security line, speaking in a firm, disciplinary voice. He reported a fraudster who was refusing to comply with establishment procedures and refusing to leave the premises. Within seconds, Officer Jenkins, the head of in-house security, a large man with a calm, professional demeanor, approached the counter. Jenkins moved with practiced efficiency, a stark contrast to Randall's performative aggression. He scanned Julian, his training overriding any superficial judgment of clothing. Jenkins asked Julian to accompany him away from the public counter. The request was polite but firm, backed by the implied authority of his position. It was at this moment, facing down the full institutional authority of the hotel, that Julian finally offered a piece of specific, actionable advice. His voice remained incredibly calm, almost monotone, a contrast to the rising panic he was surely feeling internally regarding the ticking clock. Julian suggested very deliberately that Officer Jenkins and the managers should review Section 14.3 of the Employee Guidelines before they proceeded any further. Randall immediately scoffed at the suggestion, waving it away as a textbook scammer tactic. He assured Lena and Jenkins that fraudsters always tried to muddy the water with obscure references and delays. Randall was so confident in his categorization of Julian that he never considered the possibility that the reference was genuine, specific, and ultimately lethal to his own career prospects. The 7-minute window was almost closed. While the managerial team continued their deliberate, condescending actions at the counter, completely sealed within their bubble of perceived authority, the external reality was rapidly accelerating toward catastrophe. Chloe, seated near the water feature, watched her viewer count climb past 5,000, then 10,000, then rapidly spiking toward 50,000 live viewers. The comments section of her stream was a torrent of outrage, using hashtags that quickly climbed the local Chicago trending lists. The stream title, something simple yet inflammatory like Luxury Hotel Profiles Man Live, had done its job perfectly. The documented humiliation was now viral, gaining views and commentary faster than the hotel staff could possibly have reacted. In a quiet, separate office several miles away, a corporate crisis communications specialist finally spotted the trending hashtags localized to the Pinnacle Reserve. The frantic internal chatter began. The specialist initiated an emergency alert to the senior leadership team. Lena Miller's phone, tucked into her trouser pocket, began to buzz incessantly. It was a rapid succession of urgent, frantic text messages from corporate demanding an immediate assessment of the situation near the front desk. The messages mentioned a rapidly trending discrimination hashtag directly linked to their location and suggested potential public relations disaster. Randall and Lena still focused exclusively on Julian and the immediate physical removal of their problem, either ignored the vibrating phones or dismissed the alerts as unimportant administrative noise. They were entirely consumed by the perceived victory of cornering the suspected fraudster. They had secured Officer Jenkins's cooperation and felt they had successfully boxed Julian in. They remained blissfully ignorant of the massive digital explosion occurring just 30 feet away. Julian, meanwhile, was acutely aware of the digital scrutiny. He had seen Chloe's discreet setup and understood the power of the audience. He calculated that the viral nature of the event would force the corporate office's hand much faster than any legal threat. The humiliation was not just happening to him, it was happening to the brand he controlled. He decided the time for subtle hints and policy recommendations was over. The 7 minutes had expired. Julian completely ignored the growing panic flickering across Lena's face as her phone continued to vibrate violently. He ignored Randall's final, arrogant demand to follow Officer Jenkins quietly out of the establishment. Instead, Julian reached slowly into the simple, worn messenger bag slung across his body. The motion was deliberate and focused, drawing the eyes of everyone in the immediate vicinity. He retrieved a sleek black leather folder, the kind of accessory that instantly screamed C-suite, and placed it on the marble counter with precise care. The sound of the leather meeting the stone was surprisingly loud in the now silent lobby. From the folder, Julian first retrieved a single, heavy stock business card. He slid it across the counter, stopping it directly in front of Randall Hayes. The card was stark white with minimalist silver lettering. Randall looked down, and his blood immediately ran cold. The card read, Julian Vance, Chief Executive Officer, Cornerstone Holdings. Randall's mouth parted slightly, but no sound escaped. This was the first seismic tremor. Cornerstone Holdings was one of the largest holding companies in the Midwest, known for aggressively restructuring legacy businesses. Julian didn't pause for Randall's reaction. He followed the business card with a physical financial report, placing it precisely next to the first item. The report detailed the specific, plummeting performance metrics of the Pinnacle Reserve Group, the parent company of this hotel, over the last 2 fiscal quarters. This was data Randall, as a low-level manager, should never have been able to access. The specificity of the negative data was crushing, confirming the deep financial vulnerability of the company. The final, devastating blow was delivered digitally. Julian picked up his tablet, the device he needed for the now-missed video conference, and deliberately turned the screen outward. The screen displayed the corporate leadership page for the Pinnacle Reserve Group. There, under the title of majority shareholder, a familiar picture smiled back at the stunned staff. It was Julian Vance, the man in the worn denim and plain jacket. Julian Vance had acquired the entire Pinnacle Reserve Group 6 months prior. He did not just own the room, he owned the hotel, the brand, and every person standing behind the counter, including Randall Hayes and Lena Miller. The power dynamic did not just shift, it violently inverted. The raw, immediate emotion that flooded Randall Hayes was not anger or regret. It was pure, unadulterated, professional terror. The color visibly drained from his face, leaving him a sickening shade of gray. He instinctively took a step back from the counter, leaning heavily on the shelf behind him for support, as if the reality of the business card was physically too heavy to bear. Lena Miller fared no better. She snatched her buzzing phone out of her pocket, reading the latest corporate memo, a frantic all-caps directive demanding immediate compliance with the CEO's demands, confirming the worst of their fears. She looked from the corporate page on the tablet to the quiet, unimposing figure of Julian Vance, and her world seemed to collapse inward. Officer Jenkins, the security chief, remained outwardly professional, but his eyes widened slightly in silent acknowledgement of the monumental blunder. He immediately dropped his previous posture and waited for Julian's command, recognizing the authentic authority of the man before him. Julian did not yell, he did not boast. His voice remained frighteningly even and controlled, cutting through the silence like razor wire. He calmly articulated the consequences of their actions. Julian explained that Randall had not merely profiled a guest, he had publicly humiliated the majority shareholder and chief executive of his own company. Julian then pointed a finger toward the spot on the terrazzo floor where the titanium corporate card fragments still lay reflecting the light. He spoke about the digital explosion Chloe had caused. He stated clearly that the broadcasted, documented act of discrimination and refusal of service had created a massive, quantifiable legal and public relations exposure for the company. An exposure he calculated at over $8 million, factoring in stock depreciation, litigation fees, and necessary brand repair. The sheer volume of that financial damage seemed to suck the oxygen from the air. Randall and Lena stood paralyzed, forced to confront the wreckage of their assumptions and profiling. They saw their entire careers, their comfortable lives, and their financial futures evaporate in the glare of the tablet screen. The silence stretched, heavy with the weight of absolute reckoning. Julian Vance stood tall now, the quiet posture of the perceived pauper replaced by the imposing presence of a man who held absolute power. He did not need to raise his voice to command attention. His control of the narrative was complete. He laid out the terms of the immediate consequence with surgical precision. He presented Randall Hayes and Lena Miller with 2 options, both equally devastating, but one slightly less career-ending. They could offer their immediate resignation, receiving neutral, non-disparaging references that would keep them employable, though forever tainted by this incident. Alternatively, they could face immediate termination for cause, followed by aggressive legal action stemming from the millions in damages their actions had caused. The choice was a stark and brutal lesson in corporate accountability. Randall and Lena, their faces pale and defeated, chose immediate resignation. They mumbled their acceptance, their arrogance completely extinguished. Julian accepted their decision with a simple nod, displaying no pity or satisfaction. The humiliation he had absorbed was repaid, not in kind, but through systemic professional finality. Julian then pivoted his attention to the employees who had shown professionalism or were victims of bad training. He looked directly at Officer Jenkins, who had at least attempted to follow procedure and maintain calm. Julian promoted Officer Jenkins immediately, elevating him to the newly created role of Head of Guest Advocacy and Security, ensuring that policy would henceforth be enforced through respect, not prejudice. He turned to Bethany, the nervous desk clerk. Julian recognized her fear and her minimal complicity. He did not fire her. Instead, he placed her on a rigorous, highly monitored 90-day training program focused on diversity, service recovery, and respectful engagement. He gave her a second chance, contingent on her commitment to changing the internal culture. Julian picked up his tablet, ready to deal with the fallout of the missed $350 million meeting, a meeting he was now certain he would successfully recover. His final statement to the assembled shaken staff was a powerful indictment of their operational philosophy. He told them that systemic change requires more than new policies, it requires a new mindset. He concluded with the stark truth: your assumptions today cost you everything. Every judgment you made was paid for by your own careers. The owner then simply walked past the deserted counter toward the elevators, leaving the shell-shocked staff to contemplate the ruins of their expensive establishment. The story proves that prejudice and profiling are not just moral failures. In the corporate world, they are exceptionally poor business practices. Arrogance always has a receipt. Do you think justice was served, or should Julian have pursued legal action to make a bigger public example? Subscribe, comment, like, and share this video for episodes. Thank you.